Welcome to Sound Bites, hosted by registered dietitian nutritionist Melissa Joy Dobbins. Let's delve into the science, the psychology, and the strategies behind good food and nutrition.
Thanks for tuning in to the Sound Bites podcast. If you're interested in learning about emerging science that links gut health with type 2 diabetes, I'm sharing some information and opportunities at the end of this episode about this fascinating new area of research. So stay tuned afterwards for important details, including a special offer and a coupon code. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to the Sound Bites podcast. Today's episode is about Indian cuisine and plant-based meals. My guest today is Vandana Sheth. She is a nationally recognized and award-winning registered dietitian nutritionist, certified diabetes care and education specialist, owner of a successful private practice, media spokesperson, and author of My Indian Table, quick and tasty vegetarian recipes. Welcome to the show, Vandana.
Hey, Melissa. I am so excited to be here on your podcast.
I'm so happy you're finally on the show. We first met when we were Academy spokesperson newbies back in 2011 and have remained really close ever since then. You've become such a dear, sweet friend, and I have so enjoyed getting to know you and working with you as a spokesperson. I only served 3 years, well, only, but you served, I think, 9 years, right?
Yes, I wrapped up my 9 years last year in 2020. It was an amazing journey and experience.
And I know now you are a national spokesperson for the Association of Diabetes Care and Education Specialists.
Yes, so that's another area of specialty, and I love working with clients who have blood sugar issues. So it just made sense to, represent an organization like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I did the same thing. When my role with the Academy was over, I went over to what at the time was the American Association of Diabetes Educators and was a spokesperson for them for years. And they are just so wonderful to work with. So I was really excited to see that you're doing that.
Thank you. Yes, I saw that you and a couple other friends of ours from the spokespeople at the Academy went off to the Association with Diabetes Care and Education Specialists. And that was my inspiration as well.
Oh, good. Yeah. Toby Smithson also was a spokesperson with us. And then she and I were AADE, now ADCES spokespeople. And we ended our journey at the same time, and it was during the pandemic, so we did sort of a little virtual celebration, and we shared that out on social media. It was kind of fun.
That was.
Yeah, so we're going to talk all about Indian cuisine. I can't wait. I've already learned so much from you, but we're going to learn more today. But before that, and maybe as a segue into that, I would love for you to share more about your background, growing up in India, moving to the U.S., getting interested in nutrition. And I know your mother had a huge influence on you with regard to cooking. Tell us a little bit more about that, and we'll start exploring Indian cuisine.
Absolutely. So I feel truly blessed. Having been born and raised in India, I had a mom who was a phenomenal cook. She was definitely someone who influenced my perspective on how food impacts our health. So in India, when I was growing up, we had just fresh produce. We had lots of beans and lentils and spices. And it was just every day was something designed based on what was in season. So we would have produce vendors stop by our home, or my mom would go to the market and pick up things and literally plan the menu for the day for the family based on what was available then. Mm-hmm. And it was all plant-based. We were vegetarian. I was raised that way. It was religious, but it also was a health reason where I continued being a vegetarian. And even though I was born and raised in the south of India, in a city called Madras, which is now known as Chennai, food is very, very different all over India. That's something that often people don't realize. Mm-hmm. Food in India is an experience. It's a country of great diversity. And it's almost like the Mediterranean, just like there's the Mediterranean region where you have some common components among the different countries. Mm-hmm. Even though India is just one country, food just varies from state to state and even within families in terms of how they mix things up. And if you had to broadly look at Indian cuisine, you can break it up into 4 regions just geographically based on the area. So North Indian, South Indian, if you're from the West or East. And so, as I had mentioned, I was born and raised in the South, Southeast.
Mm-hmm.
But my family, a couple generations ago, and my mom was originally from the Northwest state of Gujarat.
Mm.
And so our food at home was a combination of both cuisine from Gujarat as well as where I was born and raised. And so it was a really nice blend of spices and beans and lentils, colorful produce, lots of whole grain. My mom would make flatbreads called roti or chapati.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would have rice, and it was not just steamed rice. You could find 15 to 20 varieties of rice dishes. So it would be like lemon infused or coconut flavored rice or tamarind rice, tomato rice, all kinds of amazing. My mouth is watering as I dream about those flavors. But yeah, food was definitely an experience. It was, we didn't even think about it, but it was actually fairly well-balanced plate. And this year, with the National Nutrition Month, I love the tagline or their theme of personalize your plate, because that really fits into any cultural cuisine, any cuisine you think about. Like for an Indian plate, it's called a thali, which is often a stainless steel metal plate with compartments. And so you would fill it with your grain, you would fill it with different 2-3 types of vegetables, and you would have some kind of beans or lentils and maybe some yogurt on the side to cool things down. And that's really visually how a meal is enjoyed.
Well, yes, that's one of the things that I've learned about Indian cuisine from you. First of all, was that how diverse it is. And depending on north, south, east, west regions or states, as you mentioned, how much it can really vary. And just the sheer volume of just the different flavors and spices. I want to ask you about a couple of specific spices or foods. You mentioned chapati and roti.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was a diabetes educator dietitian at our maternal fetal medicine clinic, working with pregnant women who had diabetes. Diabetes, as you know, is more prevalent among the Indian population. And so I got to learn a lot about Indian cuisine. The term chapati kept cropping up, and I was like, explain to me what that is, because I didn't know. And then, of course, roti. Oh my gosh, it's so delicious. I love it. And we're going to talk about your book, and there's a recipe in there. And I thought, I'm going to give this a try. But then I'm thinking, it would be nice when we can travel again. Maybe you could show me, you could walk me through how to do this.
I would love that.
Like it might be. Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be so fun.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. But one of the things that really surprised me, I had no idea, is that curry is actually a blend of spices.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about some of the flavors and the seasonings? Like turmeric is something that I don't even know if I've ever tasted. I've heard a lot about it. And I was going to ask if you could give me some advice on like how to start incorporating it into my cooking.
Yes. When you mentioned curry, that was something that I just want to make sure people understand, that something that was very surprising to me when I came to this country is when someone would walk up to me and tell me that, I love curry. But actually, there's nothing called curry in an Indian home. We have these spice boxes that have individual spices. So I have turmeric and coriander and cumin, red chili powder because I like heat, and a lot of aromatics. So we have cloves and cinnamon and cardamom, black pepper. So we have all these individual spices, either whole or ground up. And then depending on your family recipe, you would mix and match. Each recipe would have some version of this mix. And so when you think about a spice mix, something you would find in an Indian home is called Garam Masala. That's the Indian mixture of spices. So there is, again, no standard recipe because it's usually passed down in the family based on your family preference. But it usually has a lot of the aromatics, and that's something that you would find in many Indian dishes. And you mentioned turmeric. And so if you have never tried turmeric, it's such a beautiful spice. It's something that's used not only in cooking, but also as almost a medicinal spice in the Indian community. So I remember most of our dishes would have that golden hue from turmeric. So if you've never used turmeric, I would say a couple easy ways to use it is maybe when you make your eggs in the morning, sprinkle some turmeric in there. It's just going to enhance the yellow of the yolk. You could add it to any kind of vegetables. If you're doing sheet pan roasted vegetables, it just adds this extra beautiful look to it. If you make any stir fries or if you make a casserole or even mac and cheese, you could add a little turmeric in there. It's going to have a little different nuance to it. But as far as the medicinal thing goes, I know growing up, if you had a cold or a cough, my mom would make turmeric milk, which was a traditional recipe as a remedy almost for a cold or cough. And I absolutely couldn't stand it. It was just milk with turmeric, and it just didn't taste good to me. So I almost refused having it. But when I came here, I started playing around with that recipe. And now there's actually a recipe in my book. And it is delicious. So it's got turmeric.
Ah, you've perfected it. All right.
I've made it a little bit more palatable, at least to me.
Now, how old were you when you came to the U.S.?
So I came here as a young adult. So I was in my early 20s. I came here because I fell in love with my husband now, but then fiance. And so I came here, as a fiance. My parents and I flew here. It's been 29 years, so almost 30 years.
And you have two wonderful children, two young adult sons who are, you just have a beautiful family.
Thank you, Melissa, and so do you. So I feel blessed because family is extremely important. It's one of my core values.
And when you moved here as a young adult, what did you notice about the cuisine, the differences? Is that when you became more interested in nutrition?
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I actually had an undergrad degree in India in nutrition and dietetics.
Okay.
And I was halfway through my master's when I fell in love with my husband and came here. But I decided to put my education on pause when I moved here. When I came here, one of the biggest shocks I felt was that when we would go to a restaurant in the early 90s, and because I was vegetarian, I was shocked at how few options there were, even though we live in Los Angeles. I remember on our honeymoon, my husband and I had driven up the coast, California coast. We'd gone to this beautiful, fancy restaurant on the pier, and there was nothing on the menu that I could eat. So the chef brought me this plate of steamed vegetables, which were very pretty, but coming from a culture with flavors just bursting into your mouth with spices and beans and lentils, this looked pretty sad to me. It was depressing. And there was no protein. But we've come a long way from then to now in terms of the American palate. And, the timing of when I came, I was so blessed. I came into a family that had been here for a while. So my husband was born here. So we have lots of cousins and uncles and aunts. So, we are able to have both the Indian traditions as well as be very proud of some of the American traditions. So I feel blessed to have both.
Wonderful. So 29 years you've been here. Okay, so you've seen a lot of changes. And as you mentioned, you're based in California, just outside Los Angeles, right?
Yes, in LA County, in a suburb called Palos Verdes.
Okay. So you've been a vegetarian your whole life. Are you vegan or?
No, so I'm vegetarian, and so I go back and forth with dairy. I think dairy can play a very good and important role in meeting my nutritional needs. There are times where I choose the type of dairy I have, but I'm not vegan. But predominantly, most of my food is plant-based.
Okay, right. And as we always say on the podcast, and everybody knows, we all need to add more plants to our diet. And one of the things that I love about your book and your approach is, it's vegetarian, it could be vegan, and you talk about how to make it vegan, but it's also for anyone who wants to do more plant-based eating. So I wanted to kind of put that out there because it's very versatile. And like I said, we could all use more plants in our diet. Tell me a little bit about, I love your tagline, so I want you to share that, and a little bit about your philosophy and your approach to eating.
Yes. So my tagline is Eat Well, Your Way for Life. And this was something I really embody in my work with my clients as well as any of the media interviews I do. I truly believe that food does not have any moral value, and all of us are very unique. And when we think about food, it's ultimately a healthy relationship. If we can build that healthy relationship with food and one that's realistic and sustainable, then we've hit it. We will feel phenomenal and we will be able to enjoy life as well.
Wonderful. And I just have to say, your joy and your warmth and your love, frankly, it just comes through in everything that you do. And I just appreciate that so much. It comes through in your book and just in listening to you talk and, of course, our friendship. So I totally agree. You completely embody that. So I just think it's a wonderful philosophy. And, you know, that relationship with food and that enjoyment factor is so important.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Now, before we start talking specifically about what's in the book, I've just got to connect with you on our shared love of dance. Everybody knows that I grew up doing ballet and I returned to it after a 25-year hiatus, and I just absolutely can't get enough. I love it. Tell us about your special love of dance.
Yes, and it's a really interesting story. So I've been a classical Indian dancer all my life, from when I was 4, 5 years old. And in India, there are 5, almost 6 classical dance styles, and these are formal dance traditions and styles with very specific forms in how you stand, how you spin, different things that you do. Mm-hmm. And so the dance style that I do is called Kathak, which is a North Indian classical dance style. And it's known for very strong footwork, almost like flamenco when you think about it, and a lot of spins. And you wear bells, and it's got a very expressive side to it as well. So you share stories with a formal stance and do a lot of spins. And that is something that I'm super passionate about. And in fact, when I was a teenager, right at high school, when you had to start applying for college, I was basically wanting to go into becoming a professional dancer. And I had gotten into this prestigious dance school in Delhi. And my parents, I remember that conversation so clearly. I had this conversation saying, I'm going to continue on with dance as my career. And my parents just sat down with me, and my dad said that, you know, you're an amazing dancer. You will always have dance, but we insist that you actually get an undergrad degree in something else. And then if you still want to pursue dance as your career, you can go back to this. And it was a tough time for me to make that switch. And at that point, I was not a happy camper at home. But I look back and I think that was the best thing. I thank my parents every single day. I tell my dad, I feel blessed to have this dance form that I'm so passionate about. I still practice. I'm part of a dance studio. We perform every year. We have artists come from India and work with us. And I get to have a career that I absolutely love and impact people's lives. So best of both worlds.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know about the aspirations to be a professional dancer. I think you might know that because I went to a performing arts high school, I was on that track as well. Although I was the one who decided not to do it because my parents were both artists. So they were completely embracing that whole concept. And I had to kind of come to them and say, yeah, I can't give everything up for this. This is not going to happen, and figure out what it meant to like change gears and go to college. But yeah, I'm also grateful that I have this still in my life. And I'm curious because you said it's a northern style of dance. Did your mother dance since she was from the north? Because you said you grew up in the south.
Right. And so, you know, in India, you have classical dance styles, which is what I'm doing, but we also have folk dances from each state.
Okay.
And so the folk dances, yes, my mom did, but this was just something I fell in love with. And my sister was a dancer too. She was a classical dancer, but she did the South Indian dance style. So she did Bharatanatyam, which is a different dance form.
Wonderful. And just absolutely gorgeous. I don't know if you call it a costume or dress or...
It is. Yes, it is. Those are dance costumes.
I've got a picture you shared with me. I'm going to put that in the show notes at soundbitesrd.com so people can look at that. It's just beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that. I just had to find out more about, because we've talked about it a little bit here and there. Just one more thing that we have in common. So let's talk more specifically about your book, My Indian Table. First of all, congratulations. I know that this was just a real passion project for you. And like I said, your philosophy and your warmth and the history and the interesting culinary journey just comes through in this book. And the photos are beautiful. What inspired you to create this book?
You're absolutely right about it being a passion project. This was something that was brewing in my head for a while, and it was based on feedback I was getting from friends, anyone who would come over. You know, we love entertaining, we love having friends over for dinner and wine, and anytime we were at parties, regardless of what I took, if it was an Indian dish, that was the most popular one that would go away. It would be empty before I knew it. And so that was sort of something I was interested in seeing, that people loved this type of food. But there was also this fear, this nervousness about getting into spices. People are overwhelmed when they think about making an Indian dish because they may be a long list of ingredients that you're not familiar with.
Right.
And so that was one of the key reasons I wrote the book, because I wanted to showcase that really you can have a few key ingredients and mix and match and make all these, dishes. And it doesn't have to take all day long, because I am all about shortcuts, because life is busy and preparing delicious food does not have to be complicated. You just need those little, tricks. And that's where the book came into fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is not just a book of recipes. I mean, to your point, that can seem a little daunting. The list of ingredients, all the spices, things that you're not maybe familiar with as a non-Indian person. So what I really love is all of the insights and guidance that you give. One of my favorite sections is the suggestions for success section. I learned so much. It's like 1 or 2 pages, and it's just chock full of helpful tips in handling different types of ingredients and how you're cooking them. But what I love too is kind of what you just said. Like, you familiarize people with key ingredients and the variety, and maybe, how, hey, if you don't have this one, just skip that ingredient. One of my favorites is like cilantro. You're like, look, I get it. Some people love it. Some people hate it. There's a lot of cilantro in here, which is great for me because I'm a fan. And as I said, it's vegetarian, but you show how to make it vegan if people want. And most meals can be made in 30 minutes or less, but there's sort of a caveat to that, if you want to explain that.
Yes. And so when I say most dishes can be made in 30 minutes or less, I'm assuming you're using already, like cooked beans or cooked lentils. And now most homes have Instant Pots. And so if you have one of those, cooking beans or lentils from scratch is not that difficult. But really, I'm a fan of canned beans. I'm a fan of frozen vegetables. I'm a fan of prepped vegetables. It's okay to take those shortcuts, because it's just a matter of playing around with those ingredients. And once you have ingredients in front of you with the right spices, it's super easy to mix and match and make so many different dishes that are not repetitive, not boring, and that can be exciting.
Yeah. And one of the things that really stood out to me was, you might pick this one recipe and it's got a lot of different spices or ingredients. You say, don't worry, because you can use a lot of those in other recipes and it'll be a completely different flavor profile or dish, but it's not like you just have one set of spices for this recipe and then a whole different set of spices for another recipe. So I think that's really awesome.
Thank you. Yes, that was definitely something I was focused on. And I also wanted to focus on ingredients that we can find easily at our regular grocery stores. Now, more and more regular grocery stores, you will find these ingredients. And if there are a couple that you need from a local Indian grocery store, I highly recommend a trip to your local Indian grocery store. They can be so much fun. It's like going to a trip, getting on a flight and going to India, but you're having that mini experience. Most big cities, especially in Chicago where you're based, there are lots of Indian grocery stores. I would encourage any of your listeners to check out their local markets, and you'll be surprised at what you'll find, and the price point of spices will be much lower.
That's a great idea. I'm going to do that. Awesome. Well, one of the first sections in your book talks about key ingredients and stocking your Indian kitchen. So do you want to share some of that with us, just to try to give us a feel for what that is?
Yeah, so some of the key ingredients would be whole grains. So if you wanted to explore and try the homemade roti or puri, which is a deep fried bread, then you would want to stock up on whole wheat flour. Some rice, you could either use basmati rice or you could use brown rice or any type of rice that you like. And of course, beans, lentils, you can buy them dry from a bin and then soak them and cook them, or you can buy canned, have them on hand. And lots of spices and of course herbs, that would be something important because that'll amp up the flavor of anything you do.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Any special cooking tools or equipment, or was it mostly like pointing out these are the types of tools that a lot of my recipes use, so you might want to have these available?
So it's mainly, I think, things most people would have on hand. So it would be a good set of knife, peeler. If you like grinding your spices, then maybe like a small grinder, like a spice grinder or coffee grinder would work. If you don't like chopping too many things, maybe a food processor. And if you like cooking your beans and lentils from scratch, then a pressure cooker would be a really helpful thing.
Okay. Yeah, so you have some basic recipes, and then you have the book is broken down into veggies, legumes, grains, but you also have, I feel like it's kind of geared towards somebody like me who, I'm comfortable in the kitchen, but I kind of need you to hold my hand a little bit, especially, with unfamiliar ingredients or recipes. You have a section that you say, look, if you just want to dip your toe in and try something that might be a little easier, you have these flavorful light meals. Can you describe one of those for us, or, a recipe? If you were telling somebody, look, if you've never cooked Indian, here's what I suggest trying first.
Yeah, so that section is really inspired by meals that we often have at home, because often we spend long days at work. And by the time you get home, you don't want to make 4 or 5 things to make a traditional Indian meal. So the light meal section is where you can just have one thing, and that almost takes care of all the food groups. So if you've never tried Indian food and you want to try, a couple recipes from that section would be a great way to start. One would be the cauliflower curried power bowl. That was a recipe that's not traditional. That's something I came up with. It's one of our family's favorite because it includes cauliflower, garbanzo beans, tomatoes, and spices. And it's just almost like one bowl meal. You can enjoy it as is, or put it on some quinoa or rice and enjoy it with some veggies on the side, or top it with some shredded lettuce. And right there you have a beautiful meal in a bowl. Another one to try, maybe I'm trying to think which one would be easier. Maybe the scrambled tofu. Mm-hmm. That would be a good one because, most of us are familiar with tofu. You can get it at your local store, and it's a great source of protein. And just, again, we're adding spices, so that turmeric and a few other Indian spices, loading it up with some mushrooms and spinach, seasoning it up. It takes 10 minutes maybe max. Mm-hmm. And then you can enjoy it either in a bowl with some whole grain toast, or enjoy it wrapped in a whole wheat tortilla. Mm-hmm. And right there you have a nice meal.
Wonderful. You even have tips on how to cook plain rice. You're really helping people just break down the basics here. So that's really good. Are there any of your favorite recipes that you wanted to point out, just to kind of get us, my mouth is already watering, but just, kind of give us some more food for thought.
Absolutely. Yes. And so the curried power bowl that I mentioned to you, that's a very popular dish at our home. That was just something that was inspired by a summer day at home. But another dish that's really dear to my heart is Rajma, which is kidney beans in a tomato garlicky sauce. Mm. And you can think of it as almost like a vegetarian chili. Mm. And a story about that dish is that was a dish from a different state, from Punjab, where I'm not from. But in our school cafeteria growing up, we used to have Indian vegetarian food available every day for school lunch. And I would typically take food from home. But this one day I didn't, or I forgot. I'm not sure what the story was, but I ended up buying food at school. And I tasted this dish for my first time. It was basmati rice with this delicious piping hot kidney beans and stewed in this tomato garlicky sauce. And oh my gosh, it was so good. I rushed home that day and described it to my mom, who then prepared her own version. Mm-hmm. And it is like comfort food to me. Mm. So that's a dish that I would recommend checking out. It's really delicious. The other one would be some beverages. So chai, which is Indian spiced tea, would be something that I would recommend trying because it's actually super easy to make and it's not as high in sugar as it is when you get it at a coffee shop here. Mm.
My daughter would love that. I just bought her a chai tea this morning.
Awesome. Well, you're going to have to make it at home sometime or send her the recipe. Mm-hmm. And the other one I'd suggest is maybe a dessert, an almond dessert that I put in the book. And that's my shortcut version. It's in 10 minutes. And it's like these little almond coins almost. And it's made with almonds and saffron and cardamom. It's so delicious.
Getting me hungrier. And you also have what you call an easy meals formula. And I think this might be helpful for people, again, maybe they're not used to eating vegetarian or Indian cuisine, and they just see this as a bunch of dishes. Like, how do you put this all together? So can you tell us about this easy meals formula?
So it's literally like the My Plate. So a couple dishes I would recommend is if you did the curried power bowl, that has the veggies, it has cauliflower, it has beans, it has tomatoes, and you would pair it with some maybe rice for carbs, and you could have some chopped vegetables on the side. There's a dish called kachumber in the book. That would be your meal. Another one could be the scrambled tofu with the tortilla, and you could have that with some yogurt if you'd like on the side. Or if you felt like another dish, khichdi is a very popular comfort food. And if you're familiar with Ayurveda, it's becoming very popular. And khichdi is this lentil and rice dish, and it's very soft and comforting. You put ghee on it. Ghee is clarified butter, and it's got turmeric and some spices. And so that's already got the rice and lentils and spices. And then you could have some vegetables on the side, one of the vegetable dishes that I have in the book. And you could have some yogurt or raita on the side. And that, again, makes it a complete meal.
Excellent. I would like to talk briefly about some of the different sort of herbs or spices or flavorings. You know, some of these people will be very familiar with, like garlic or ginger or black peppercorns. But what are some of the, like, if I was going to expand my spice cabinet, which it's so funny, I always say on the show that I'm not that culinary, but I realize because I had to get a new spice cabinet, I couldn't find one that was really working for me. And the reason is because I have 60 spice bottles and I actually use them all. So I said to myself, if I have this many spice bottles, I must be somewhat culinary. So I need to stop saying that I'm not.
Yes.
So my husband built me an awesome spice cabinet because I couldn't find one. But if I were to expand, you know, and maybe the average person has 12 spice bottles, I don't know. But if I was to expand, and I'm talking dried spices, you know, a lot of this could be fresh, like the garlic and the cilantro. But if I were to expand, what would be some of the first few spices that you would suggest that I try? We talked about turmeric, but what else would you suggest?
So if you want to simplify it, you could actually get Garam Masala, which is a mixture of a lot of the Indian spices. And that would take care of many of those flavors that we talked about. But if you wanted individual spices, again, you may have many of these already. So having cardamom, cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, bay leaves. We talked about turmeric. And I would, again, mention cumin. That would be a popular dish, popular ingredient.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people have that. They're making chili or tacos or something.
Exactly. And so there's an overlap of these spices that you would be using in other things. Some others that you may not use are fennel seeds. That would be part of some Indian dishes. Mustard seeds would be part of Indian dishes. So those would be some that I would say are go-to. But again, if you want to simplify it, if you just wanted to pick up one spice mix to give you some of those flavors, I would say get a good quality garam masala. And in the book, there's actually a recipe for it, either from scratch with whole spices that you roast and crush, or a quick 5-minute version with a mix of different powders that you mix together and have it.
Okay, wonderful. And what I really like too is the variety of rices, the variety of beans, legumes, lentils. You know, that helps us expand our palate as well and have some nice variety.
Yes, I think so. And I'm just so pleased with the variety of things that are available now in our regular grocery stores and, globally. Yeah, this country has definitely come a long way in terms of flavors and things that we look forward to.
Absolutely. Well, I know you have a wonderful opportunity for everybody listening to kind of get a sneak peek at some of your recipes. So I'm going to have a link in my show notes for that. But do you want to give us a little teaser on that, what people can find if they click on the link?
Sure. I put in a couple recipes from the book, and I have a couple pictures from the book. And I have to do a shout out to my friend, Laura, who did the pictures for me.
They're wonderful.
Thank you. We had so much fun styling the pictures. Many of the fabrics in the pictures are my mom's saris, so it was very personal to me.
Yeah.
So the sneak peek will have a few pictures. It'll have at least, I think, 3 or 4 recipes from the book. And if anyone is interested, the book is available on Amazon or anywhere books are sold.
Mm-hmm.
It's available in both the hard copy as well as an ebook.
Yes, and thank you for giving me a signed copy. I'm just treasuring this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And where can people find you online, your website, and your social media?
Yeah, so my website is vandanasheth.com, and I'm on Instagram. You can find me at Vandana Sheth. I'm also on Facebook, Vandana Sheth RDCDE. I'm on Twitter, Vandana Sheth RD, and LinkedIn, Vandana Sheth.
Well, and I'll put all those links, of course, in the show notes as well. Is there anything else you want to tell us about the book, Indian cuisine, plant-based eating, your personal journey as we're wrapping up here?
Yeah, I just, again, want to remind people that this is my lens, and I believe food is so much more than just fuel for our body. Food is something to be savored. Food really connects us in a profound way to each other, to our environment, to our culture, our memories, and it can bring a lot of joy. So often we step away from that when we think in terms of just macros and numbers. So I really would love for people to take the time to savor their meals and make it a celebration and explore other cuisines, and don't be intimidated. Indian cuisine can be a wonderful place to try some of these spices and herbs and beans and lentils, and you may be surprised at how much you enjoy them.
Absolutely. Well, this is exactly what I needed in order to get a little bit more of an Indian table in my house. So thank you so much, Vandana. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate you and our friendship, and I hope you are doing well.
Thanks so much, Melissa. It was a joy being here.
My pleasure. And for everybody listening, as always, enjoy your food with health in mind and maybe a little Indian cuisine. Till next time. Thanks for staying tuned for more information about gut health and type 2 diabetes. First, be sure to tune in to episode 168, The Gut Microbiome and Type 2 Diabetes, at soundbitesrd.com/168. Second, you can deepen your knowledge on this cutting-edge topic by attending a free, interactive thought leadership learning event called Learn How Emerging Research Links Gut Microbiome Alterations with Metabolic Syndrome. It's on June 16th, 2021 from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern. Space is very limited, so be sure to register today. To register, you can go to my episode and show notes at soundbitesrd.com/168 or find me on Instagram at MelissaJoyRD, and you'll find the link in my bio link tree. And third, if you or one of the patients you counsel are interested in trying pendulum glucose control, you may order it at pendulumlife.com. Please enter coupon code MelissaJoy25. That's all caps, MelissaJoy25, to receive 25% off the first bottle of a subscription purchase now through September 30th, 2021. Thanks again for listening. Till next time.
For more information, visit soundbitesrd.com. Music by Dave Burke, produced by Jag in Detroit Podcasts.